because one earthquake is never enough. I mean, if you're going to have one, you might as well go big with it. Anybody ever experienced a real seismic shake of an earthquake? Some of you are true Midwesterners, right? Tornadoes are one thing, but those crazy people in California can keep their earthquakes, right? I experienced my first earthquake after we had been living in Los Angeles for about 18 months. And it was about 6:20 in the morning. Was anybody up at 6:20? Some of y'all were up at 6:20. Some of us were getting ready to be out on the balcony at 6:20. 6:20, it was still pretty dark, wasn't it? Yeah? It was pretty dark that morning. The sun was just beginning to peek its head over the top of the downtown LA skyline just off to our east. And I had just finished my workout in the park with about 10 other gals. The sweaty sisterhood of the sunrise, you might say. My husband might say the stinky, sweaty sisterhood of the early morning sunrise. These girls and I spent 3 mornings a week together. We started our days together. We supported one another. We challenged one another. And we had just finished up and we were sitting on the ground and we were doing some stretching. And suddenly I thought, wow, I must have pushed myself a little too hard. Wow, I really worked out today. I was feeling a little dizzy, a little disoriented, maybe even. I felt like I was a little unstable, more so than usual. I was a little physically and emotionally unstable. And suddenly one of the voices of one of my workout sisters said, well, if we weren't awake before, we are now. And I realized, of course, what had happened. And it had nothing to do with my workout at all. And it had everything to do with the earth underneath me. This Midwestern girl had been shaken. And once my head stopped spinning and my heart stopped pounding, well, the first thing I did was look for my water bottle because I needed a drink of water. And then, of course, the next thing I did was to head home to find my people, because that's what you do when the earth shakes, right? You get a drink and you find your people. So I got home, and my people were fine, of course. The kids were so excited to have been shaken out of bed by their first earthquake. And it was just a little one, right? I mean, it was like a 4.7 on the Richter scale. I mean, for Californians, that isn't really even a quake. That's like barely going to shake the dishes in the cabinet. But for me, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. It had shaken me, and it reminded me, we are not prepared. We are not prepared. And I'm like a girl who likes to have a plan and work her plan, and I maybe have control needs. Just little ones, though, just small ones. And I realized we were not properly planned. The kids were, of course, because in the school they require you to have an earthquake kit for every child. And it had a note from their dad and me, and a water, and a Cliff Bar, and out-of-state emergency numbers on landlines, of course. That means you got to find somebody with a landline, right? And we had talked about our plan. But after being shaken, this time I followed through. I sent my husband to the grocery store and we bought Costco out of water. Because you need a lot of it at home, but not just at home. You got to have it in the trunk of your car, alongside your tennis shoes. Tennis shoes for everybody in the trunk of the car. And food for the dog in a baggie in the trunk too. You got to have that too. these things. And I was prepared because this quake had shaken me into action. You know, for those of us who are from the Midwest, earthquakes feel a little trickier. I don't know about you, but earthquakes feel trickier than tornadoes do. Maybe it's because there's no warning. There's no Storm Track 9 with Brian Busby. And, you know, you don't have Joe Loria to keep you forewarned, right? They just happen. And you never know when they're going to happen. True story, a friend of ours, during that earthquake at 6:20 morning, on the toilet. Another friend, a little scarier maybe, on the subway. You can't be prepared for that stuff. But what I remember the most from that day was I had this realization that when the earth starts to shiver and shake, you know for certain that there are things that you cannot control. There are things much, much bigger than you. And there is only so much that you can plan for, and there is only so much that you can plan. Because when the earth moves underneath you, you just have to be still. Just sit still and wait. And wait and see what happens next. Now, for me, on that morning, I was really grateful that I was with the sisters. These women who wouldn't recognize me all dressed up like this with my hair done and mascara on. These girls had seen me at my core. They knew exactly how many push-ups I can do, and they always wanted me to do one more. They always challenged me and pushed me to be better than I thought that I could be. They cheered me on when I wasn't sure I could. I had journeyed with some of these women for more than a year, and I would journey with many of them until the day before we moved back home to Kansas City. These were girls that I journeyed with. And so I feel like I can relate a little bit to Mary and the other Mary. I hate that they call her the other Mary. But that's what we got. Mary and her other sister Mary here in the 28th chapter of Matthew. I feel like I can relate to these girls. Just a few verses before this one, we learned that these girls had followed Jesus from Galilee. So they had been with him for some time. They had been with him, providing for him. And there were two earthquakes, because there's two earthquakes in the story. There was an earthquake on Good Friday as well in Matthew's gospel. In Matthew's gospel, at the moment of Jesus' death, the earth shook and the rocks split open. So these were gals who had navigated tougher stuff than one more push-up. And on this morning, it was one more morning of following Jesus together. To get up early and get out and see where Jesus was going to lead, but they thought that that path was leading them to a tomb. This was one more journey, one final journey, they thought, to find their friend. This journey had been full of difficulty and challenges and so many others. All of the others had left and abandoned and denied and betrayed, and they were gone. And it was just Mary and her sister Mary. Here on this weird, confusing, and somewhat random morning. Headed out with a plan and a goal and a job to do, and then the earth started to quake again. And no amount of planning or preparation could have prepared them for what happened or what would happen next. Even though Jesus had tried to give them a little bit of a hint, or if you've been with us all through Lent, a roadmap. We've been trying to find this roadmap for following Jesus. Jesus tried to tell them, but then the earth shook beneath them and everything changed in an instant. And I can't help but wonder if one Mary looked to the other and said, well, if we weren't awake before, we are now. And then what did they do? They ran to find their people, because that's what you do when the earth shakes. You run to find your people, those who had left them, and to tell them about this earthquake and about being awakened. This earthquake had woken them to hope, to something new, to preparation. They had been awakened to action. They were shaken from their warm, soft, comfy beds of complacency and knew they had to do something. Their lives were going to be different. And when you have that moment, you have two options, it seems. You can keep doing things the way you've always been done them and keep standing still. Just sit still. Or you can get up and run. Running, being woken up and running into something new that God is calling you into. And living lives as Easter people always calls us to keep running to the something new. I'm reminded that it was only when they were on their way back out, running to find their people, running on the road to share their fear and excitement, that weird mix, that weird adrenaline rush, that mixture of fear and excitement, only then did they encounter the risen Lord. My friends, today isn't about remembering some magical one-time event that could be a secret in a J.K. Rowling sequel to Harry Potter, right? This is not magic. This isn't magic or sci-fi or fantasy. It seems to me that Easter is about celebrating all the little acts of waking up to our lives. Waking up to our futures and to all the ways that God is calling us into something new. It's about being out on the road after the earthquake, gathering up, finding your people, and knowing that there is stuff you cannot control. Easter shakes us to remember that God is always looking forward with hope and vision and possibility, and God is inviting us into forward motion as well. I'm wondering about what Easter earthquake might be shaking you awake this morning. What God stuff, the holy stuff, the most important stuff are you waking up to or need to wake up to this morning? Living life as Easter people reminds us that Easter is a way of life. Waking up every day, listening for God's voice, calling us forward, because no matter what happened on Friday, Sunday, Easter Day is always within the realm of possibility. True story. Sorry, choir, now I'm really I hate having my back to y'all. I hate it when you stay back there. Like most preachers in this country this morning, and some of you clergy preacher types in the room know that most clergy spend like 800 million hours more on this sermon than you do any other. And so you really want to have a big bang at the end. You know, it's not enough just to start it with an earthquake. You ought to end with one too. And this morning I was driving in, about 5:30, And suddenly, I promise I was not going over the speed limit. I promise I was not driving too fast. But I may have passed a Children's Mercy Hospital transport vehicle. And in that vehicle, there's a window in the back, and you could see that there were people inside. And suddenly, my big fancy stiletto gospeled ending didn't seem to fit anymore. Because somewhere, there was a mama still having Good Friday because her baby was in the back of that transport vehicle. And so I thought, well, what would you say to that mama on this Easter Sunday? And I thought to myself, what do I know? What do I know for sure on Easter Sunday? When I still feel the earth quake and shake underneath me, what do I know for sure? And I turned on to Emmanuel Cleaver off of 71 Highway, and I said, literally out loud, what do I need to know for sure today, God, so that I can make sure that somebody who needs a little Easter today gets that? What do I need to know for sure? Clear as day. Clear as day, I heard in my head that you are loved. That you are loved. I kind of laughed. I maybe had a tear. And it dawned on me. And I pulled into the parking lot, and I literally pulled out one of those envelopes they give you at the bank drive-thru, and I started scribbling this. Because I'm reminded that no matter what earthquake is shaking us, whether it's on Good Friday or Easter Sunday or a random Wednesday in August, when the earth shakes, we are loved. We are loved. And that may sound really simplistic and not very fancy for an Easter Sunday, but that is the gospel. It is that simple. The world, my friends, is very complicated. All of it is very, very complicated. But Jesus is really, really simple. You are loved. And so this Easter, I pray that you wake up to love. The powerful, unconditional love of God that could not keep Jesus in that tomb. The kind of love that cannot contain death, that can't be planned for or prepared for or controlled. Love shows up when you least expect it and most need it. And that's Easter. Every dang day. Every dang day. May you know the love of Easter, my friends. May you know Easter. So when the earth shakes and the earth quakes, that you can be assured. Love. That same energy that could not be held in a tomb all those years ago still moves in the world today. And my prayer for you is that you know it. That you know the powerful love of God for you. May it be so. May it be so for each and all of us. Amen.